In today's episode of Today in World War II, March 10th, super cryptologist Joseph Rochefort in Pearl Harbor narrows down what AF is or what it could be. In Tunisia, the Axis forces fall back to another defense line in the face of massive offensives from the British and the Americans. The Germans lose four U-boats in a single day. Finally, the Germans were forced to evacuate Wesel in Germany as the Third Army captures Bonn. We're almost finished with the war in Germany, but we're getting close. Let's put it that way. Let's get started. Okay, on March 10th, 1942, at Pearl Harbor, super cryptologist Joseph Rochefort and his crew at Pearl Harbor. I've talked about this in previous episodes. The main conundrum they're facing now, the puzzle they're trying to unlock is who is AF in radio signals from the Japanese Navy. The Japanese continue to reference target AF, and it's vitally important that the Americans figure out where that target is and where the attack's going to be so they can lay a trap. Because remember, Kido Butte, Japanese carrier strike force that hit Pearl Harbor, had six fleet aircraft with all of their highly trained pilots, their torpedo bombers, their dive bombers, their Zero fighters, all the main battleships, the cruisers, the whole nine yards. The American Navy could not go toe to toe with them, but they still had to resist them. But if they could lure them into a trap, an attack from the side, from a direction where they were not expected, the element of surprise could turn the tables. Because the Americans did have four carriers. They had the Lexington, they had the Yorktown, the Enterprise, and they had the Saratoga, and they had the Hornet. They had actually had five. But I believe the Saratoga had been hit by a Japanese torpedo, so it was still out of action. While those odds would not be great, at least they were close. So Rochefort contacted superiors and said that he believed that there was three possible targets: Johnston Island, Palmyra Island, or Midway. Now, privately, he reported to his superiors, not officially, but privately he said, I think it's Midway. They weren't convinced yet, but we know history shows that he was on the right track. On March 10th, 1943, the German and Italian forces that had tried an attack, Rommel had an attack that was designed called Operation Capri. They tried to make progress in southeastern Tunisia, but didn't work out. They had to fall back to the Mareth Line. And as I reported yesterday, Rommel had been ordered out of Tunisia at this time for quote unquote health reasons. He did have health reasons, but like I said yesterday, kind of a face-saving explanation for the public is why he got pulled out, not because he was going to lose, and he was going to lose pretty quickly, very soon. But again, attacking when you have no chance, all it does is just speed up defeat, and that's what's happening here now. Speaking of speeding up defeat and attacking, even though we're in 1944, since May of 1943, in the Battle of the Atlantic, the Royal Navy and the American and the Canadian Navy had pretty much taken the upper hand and would put the U-boats on their heels. Dönitz was still sending U-boats out there to get slaughtered. And on this date, March 10th, 1943, excuse me, 1944, the Kriegsmarine, the German Navy, lost four U-boats in a single day. They lost U-boat 343, 450, 625, and 825. They couldn't stand a chance because the anti-submarine forces were just too strong. By this time, first of all, you had better sonar, you had radio homing torpedoes, you had the next version of the Hedgehog, where instead of just depth charges, you could shoot out these like mortar shells, contact shells that they hit the submarine, it would tear a hole in their pressure hole and sink them. Then you also had these hunter killer groups where you would have destroyers, you'd have escort carriers, you could blanket the entire area, and the Germans subs had to eventually surface to get air and recharge their batteries. Those hunter killer groups could stay there as long as they needed to force the U-boats to surface. Or if the hunter surface groups weren't nearby, they had these air patrols. You had the aircraft coming from the escort carriers. You had long range aircraft coming from these bases all over the place. They closed the air gap. There was no safe haven anymore for the German U-boats to be able to surface relatively safely from American and British air attacks. There was no rest. And of course, you can see why in one day it was just normal. It was a new normal now for the U-boats to get slaughtered, and that's what was happening here. And finally, speaking of getting slaughtered, on March 10th, 1945, the Germans evacuated the city of Wesel in Germany proper because the Third Army had captured Bonn. Like I said, crunch time was coming for the Germans. It's March 10th, 1945. 6 weeks max, it's over, right? Now it's all over but the shouting. That's what's going on right now. But you still got to play out the schedule, as they say in sports. And I'm going to play out my schedule by getting you a video tomorrow. But as for today, that's it. Thank you for showing up, watching my videos. I sure appreciate it. I'll talk to you tomorrow.